Well, thank you very much for joining us. We'll get started, and by the time we finish the intros, I think most people will already sign in. So thank you everyone for joining us for this very special ACT-CTU clinical trial rounds in honor of International Clinical Trials Day. This is a really special day where we really honor the people behind the clinical trials, whether that's the researchers, the staff, the nurses, the patients, the patient partners, all the admin teams. And so we really want to thank everyone for all the incredible hard work for such an important work to advance healthcare. And just a little bit about what why today? Why do we celebrate International Clinical Trials Day on May 20th? Well, it's actually in honor of the first clinical trial that is reported, where we have Dr. James Lind. He was a surgeon on the British Navy fleet, and there was the problem of scurvy. So he wanted to see which treatment would be most suitable to treat scurvy to allow the soldiers to benefit and thrive. And so he randomized 12 sailors to 6 groups, and he provided them with 6 different treatments. Like some of them received, what did they receive? They received seawater, others of them received vinegar, others cider, and some citrus fruits. And the results showed that those that received citrus fruit recovered, and the other 5 groups didn't show any benefits. So, and there you go. That was really the foundational work that, gave most of us a job today that are here. So it's thank you, Dr. James Lind. So that's a little bit about why we're here to Clinical Trials Day. Why we're here today is really to talk about a very important topic in clinical trials, and really it's about patient engagement. It's something that we're realizing more and more is critical to the success of research, and I really look forward to hearing from the experts from the ACT Patient Engagement Committee about this topic. Who are our experts today? Well, we have Yann Défassés. Yann is a patient partner with the ACT Patient Engagement Committee. He is a self-taught lifelong learner dedicated to advancing social justice through engagement, co-creation, and knowledge mobilization. Drawing on lived experience as a caregiver and research partner, Yann works to strengthen autonomy, participation, and social influence of historically marginalized individuals and communities. With us today also is Amanda Doherty-Kirby. She's also a patient partner with the ACT Patient Engagement Committee. She has 6 children, all with multiple diagnoses. 2 of her children have participated in clinical trials, while another was offered the opportunity to participate but wasn't able to due to feasibility constraints. Amanda's passionate about patient engagement and partnering on projects and within networks related to childhood disability, research engagement, clinical trials, rare disease, and knowledge synthesis. And lastly, we welcome Dr. Motahareh Karimijashni. She's a postdoctoral fellow at the Ottawa Hospital Research Institute. Her research focuses on patient engagement in clinical trials and identifying the training needs of trial teams to support meaningful and effective engagement. She's also a qualified physiotherapist with extensive experience in rehabilitation and orthopedics, including clinical trials, as well as in developing patient-centered outcomes. Without further ado, I pass the word to our presenters. Thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to hearing your talk.
Thank you so much, Amanda, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today in the International Clinical Trial Day, and I would like to wish everyone a happy International Clinical Trial Day. Today, we are presenting on behalf of the Patients Engagement Committee regarding the patients' engagement in a clinical trial. I want to first start with land acknowledgement. I'm based in Ottawa Hospital Research Institute, which is the same as the Ottawa Hospital. The Ottawa Hospital is located upon traditional and unceded Algonquin territory, and that at the Ottawa Hospital, we have the privilege and responsibility to serve First Nations, Métis and Inuit, and to demonstrate respect for the contribution, culture, and traditional knowledge of all Indigenous people. This acknowledgement is particularly important when we think about the patients and community engagement. It reminds us of the historical relationship between institution and indigenous communities and the trauma that may be connected to these experiences. As we work to build and also to rebuild a relationship with patients and communities, and these realities should inform how we approach the engagement and how we work together. So as we move through today's discussion, I encourage everyone to reflect on how these considerations may apply to your work, relationships, and approaches to engagement. As Amanda mentioned, I'm Motahareh. I'm a pediatrician and a researcher at Ottawa Hospital, supporting the project related to patients' engagement at the Ottawa Hospital Research Institute. And today I'm presenting with two of my colleagues, Jan and Amanda, who are the patient's partner and the patient's engagement committee. And we have the privilege of the learning from their experiences as patient's partner. First of all, patients-oriented research is a continuum of research that engages patients as partner, focuses on patients, identify priorities, and improve patients' outcome. This research conducted by multidisciplinary teams in partnership with a relevant stakeholder aims to apply the knowledge generated to improve the healthcare system and practice. And in order to foster a more patient-oriented research culture in Canada introduced the strategy for patient-oriented research, or a SPOR framework. And this SPOR framework is a collaboration of federal, provincial, and territorial partners, all dedicated to integrating research into care. There are multiple definitions of what patients' engagement is, but the common thread across all of them is actively working and collaborating with patients' partner on a research theme. And there are multiple terms for patients' engagement. We use patients' engagement in North America, but you might hear other terms in other countries, such as patients and public involvement and engagement, and consumer engagement, but they all have the same meaning. And I just want to emphasize and note at the beginning of the session that we are talking about patients' partner in a research. So they are working as a part of the study team in the designing of the research project and other sections of the clinical trial. So they are working as a part of the study team, and they're working with the researchers. So they are not participants, and we are not gathering the information, and we are not providing the treatment. So they are part of the research team. And for simplicity, we use the definition provided by Strategy for Patient-Oriented Research. Individuals with personal experience of a health issue and their informal caregiver, including family and friends. So the term patient is used as an umbrella term. In other words, whenever we use the term patients, we are also including family members and informal caregivers like friends. And I say patient's partner a lot, but the best practice is to ask patient's partner what they want to be called. And lots of people have different preferences. Some people prefer patients and caregiver partner or advisor, person with lived experiences or lived experiences advisor, community advisor, peer advisor, or a consumer or user. And I want to emphasize the importance of the patient's engagement because it helps ensure that the research addresses outcomes that truly matter to patients. When patients are involved, studies are more relevant, feasible, and patient-centered. And it can also improve recruitment, adherence, and retention, which strengthen the quality of the data. Also, patients' engagement enhances transparency and trust and helps ensure that findings are meaningful and easier to translate into real-world practice. I hand over to my colleague, Jan, to note his experiences as a patient's partner in clinical trial and the importance of the patient's engagement.
Yeah, don't forget to unmute. Hello, everyone. Thank you for your time, interest, and the opportunity to share my perspective on the importance of engagement in trial. And as a typical Canadian, I apologize in advance for my accent. I'm from Quebec, so that's why I will try to follow my presentation strictly. When we talk about patient engagement, we often describe it as giving patient a voice, and of course, having a voice matter. But for me, engagement became something much deeper than that. It became a path where people can move forward together, learn together, build together, and sometimes simply survive difficult reality together. More than 10 years ago now, the diagnosis and condition of my son completely transformed our family reality. Overnight, we became part of minority. I had already been sensitive to issue of inclusion and inequality before that, but there's a major difference between observing exclusion from the outside and living it personally. Suddenly, systems that appear neutral no longer felt neutral. Policies designed for most people often create barrier for family like ours. And once you start seeing this barrier, you realize how interconnected they are. One inequity often lead to another one. Like many family, advocacy became part of our daily life. You try to understand system, you try to define right, you try to explain reality that are often invisible to others. But advocacy can be exhausting, sometimes frustrating, sometimes isolating. And at some point, I realized something's important. Confrontation alone rarely creates sustainable change. What's changing things for me was discovering space where discussion, collaboration, and partnership were actually possible. Space where lived experience was not treated as a problem to manage, but as acknowledged that could contribute to something meaningful. That's completely changed my relationship with engagement. Instead of feeling stuck in constant opposition, I began experiencing engagement as a collective process, not simply speaking, but walking alongside others, researcher, clinician, other patient partner, community members. And over time, something's important happen when you continue walking with people, multiple project and conversation. Trust develop, confidence develop, literacy develop, relationship deep, deepen engagement, stop being transactional. It became human. And what makes partnership so powerful, it's that is fundamentally dynamic rather than protocol and report. Human relationship evolve constantly. Trust evolve, confidence evolve, literacy evolve, the ability to collaborate evolve, partnership is alive, but many of systems surrounding research are often much more static. Protocol, report, metrics, and institutional structure tend to capture fixed moment in time. They are often designed to standardize, measure, and stabilize. And of course, the structure are necessary, but human engagement does not evolve in a linear or purely measurable way. Real partnership develop through continuous interaction, share experience, informal discussion, tension, learning, and relationship building over time. Its value cannot always be fully captured to statistic, checkbox, or predefined engagement frameworks. Sometimes the most important outcomes are relational. A new level of trust, a deeper sense of belonging, increased confidence, the emergence of shared vision, or the simple fact that people continue to collaborating beyond a single project. That continuity is difficult to quantify, but it may be one of the most transformative dimensions of an authentic partnership. I also realized that partnership creates sometimes many people living difficulty realities deeply need movement, the feeling that painful experience can still lead somewhere meaningful, that our reality can help improve system, research and future experience for others, that we are not only reacting to problems, but participating in building solution. And this is why I believe authentic patient engagement, it's not simply about representation, it's about co-construction. It's about creating environment where people can learn together, influence together, and grow together over the time. Because when engagement become relational instead of symbolic, it's became much more sustainable, meaningful, and transformative. But despite all its potential, authentic partnership, it's also come with many barriers, some structural, some institutional, and some very human. Uh, and that's what I like to explore next. Um, and what makes the human dimension so powerful, it's that partnership, it's not static, dynamic, it's evolve continually through relationship, experience, trust over the time. Sorry, I said I will follow my sheet and I lost the place. But what I mean with this, it's everything's following a continuum. That's the bridge to let the place to my colleague. It's not static, it's a dynamic space. And I will let the place to Amanda.
So you've seen what engagement is and how meaningful it can be. And so we recall that patient-oriented research is a continuum of research that engages patients as partners, focuses on patient-identified priorities, and improves patient outcomes. So we have this graphic that many of you may be familiar with, a variation of it from a framework developed by the International Association for Public Participation. At the levels toward the left, there's simply the one-way exchange of information, sharing knowledge with patients or the public, a push from researchers to patients. And while this is important, it's not what we refer to when we speak about engagement typically. So with increasing engagement, there becomes a bi-directional flow of information, perhaps on a limited range of things on an ad hoc basis. And then as engagement increases, there's a greater involvement on decisions, including ultimately patient decision making. You will notice in my intro that I said I had varied interest, or that it said I had varied interest. I have children with neurodevelopmental disabilities, episodic to severe and chronic migraine, learning disabilities, a genetic diabetes, and more. And I've spent many years navigating the educational and medical systems to support and advocate for them. And I wanted to be able to share our experience. So when I learned about patient and family engagement, it was a good fit for an advocate and lifelong learner like me. I had no idea it was a thing. And I have to tell you, I have a research background, but I've been home for almost 20 years because of the needs of my kids. And I didn't know patient engagement was a thing until 2020, so not all that long ago. And then I have had the immense pleasure through the years to work at all of these levels, depending on the project. For example, at the consultation level, I was part of a group who were presented with results from a review on the components to create a plain language summary and provided feedback on those. That was just 2 meetings, short term. I wasn't involved throughout the project, just to give our perspective at the end. Recently, I was part of a project to create reporting guidelines for pediatric clinical trial protocols and reports. And most of that was at the involved level as a member of a patient and caregiver advisory committee who met regularly with the project team, giving feedback on the project, reviewing documents, trialing surveys, and etc. And we could advise, but we did not have final decision-making power. But toward the end of that, some of us were able to, if we wanted to, participate in writing and editing the elaboration and explanation document. And that was really eye-opening for me. I had the opportunity to look and search for examples and also help to co-create some explanations around that. So in that case, I was working more at the collaborate level. And then also one of my earliest engagements as a caregiver partner examining the training needs of youth with neurodevelopmental disabilities who wanted to partner in research. And still one of the best examples of engagement that I have been involved with. In that project, we all worked together to make decisions. We met monthly, gave feedback on all documents, co-created workshops, and shared results with others. And all the time, the whole team made decisions based on consensus. And this was my first experience with learning how to code qualitative data because it was a skill I wanted to learn, and it was offered to patient partners. So 3 of us were able to actually learn how to code qualitative data. I'm now empowered to lead 2 projects where I'm supported. I have to admit, I'm a Sepsis Canada patient partner trainee with the Health Research Training Program, and I won an award for a project co-creating a resource for sepsis survivors. And I'm currently leading a review on patient engagement in pediatric rare disease clinical trials, starting with a database of those trials. And what should be said is patient partners do not have to work at any one stage through a project. You can have multiple patient partners, with some of them working, say, at the collaborate level as a co-investigator on a project, or you can bring in others at another time, say at the consultation level, to share your results. So if you seem a little overwhelmed, you can start maybe at the consult level and work differently, or you can jump right in. And I'm going to send it back to Motahareh.
Thank you so much, Amanda and Dion, for sharing your wonderful experiences. As I mentioned, regarding the sport framework, regarding for improving the patient-centered care, but despite the introduction of the sport framework, there is a limited knowledge about the patient's engagement in Canadian randomized clinical trials. So we conducted a scoping review to review the reporting of the patient's engagement in randomized clinical trial that were exclusively conducted in Canada, and to identify the aspect of this trial in which patients are reported to be engaged. So we included the randomized clinical trial, and that were exclusively conducted in Canada, and they were registered on clinicaltrial.gov between January 2010 and December 2022. And the starting date of January 2010 was selected to provide the baseline prior to introduction of the sport framework in 2011, and specifically the publication of the CHR sport framework in 2015. And the ACT consortium was formally launched in January 2023. So the end date of December 2022 reflected a Canadian landscape prior to introduction of the Accelerated Clinical Trial Consortium. So based on the result of the scoping review of 2,318 registered and published Canadian randomized clinical trial, only 142, which is 6.1, reported patients' engagement, and of these 35 papers documented the patient's engagement only in the protocol, without mentioning any information for including the patient's partner in the primary paper of the result. So the reported prevalence of the patient's engagement was highest in trial with registered sites in Prince Edward Island and lowest in Quebec. Studies in phase 1 trials had limited reported patient's engagement compared to trial registered with no phase allocation. And a trial involving behavioral intervention most commonly reported patients' engagement, followed by registered with other interventions such as surgery or rehabilitation, and no trial involving a procedure, dietary supplement, biological vaccine, radiation, combination product, diagnostic test, or genetic intervention reported patients' engagement. And studies that indicated the government funding had the highest reported prevalence of the patient's engagement, with studies indicating industry funding having the lowest reported prevalence. Among 142 trials with reported patients' engagement, patients were most frequently reported to be involved in designing the intervention, followed by formative research activities, developing research questions, and disseminating the result. And our analysis showed an increase in the reporting of engagement per year, and in comparison of the prior 2015 and after 2015, and before introduction of the sport framework and after introduction of the sport framework, there was a statistically significant increase in the prevalence of the trial reporting patients' engagement And of 142 randomized controlled trial, 104 focused on adults, 8 on children, and 30 on both adults and children. And of these, 14 randomized controlled trial included patient's partner as co-authors, and 95 randomized controlled trial acknowledged patient's partner in the acknowledgement section. So we, in this scoping review, we showed that the reported patients' engagement in Canadian randomized controlled trial is low, which is consistent with other studies that were conducted in other countries that reported the low percentages of the patients' engagement in randomized controlled trial. There might be some potential for underreporting of the patients' engagement in prior randomized controlled trial because it was not mandatory based on the guidelines such as CONSORT, but based on the update of CONSORT in 2025, and that now is recommended based on this guideline, and we expect to have an increase in the reporting of the patient's engagement in future clinical trial. And also we have showed a trend in the reporting of the patient's engagement after introduction of this SPOR framework, which shows the positive influence of this framework. And also we showed that the patients more frequently involved in certain type of the interventions, such as behavioral, and patients in engagement noted in key areas of the trial design or conduct. And we also showed the limited co-authorship of the patient's partner in the published randomized controlled trial. So I hand over to Amanda to provide more information about this scoping review.
So we're talking about patient engagement in clinical trials, but we had patients engaged in this scoping review as well. We were able to give feedback on the protocol, the extraction form, the manuscript, and also we're trained in the Airtable, and we're able to do a small number of extractions. So that was really interesting. So I just want to say that this committee actually does listen to and incorporate patient partner views regularly. And I'm going to put this engagement results into perspective. First, I have to say I'm really disappointed, but on the upside, I'm a pragmatic optimist. There's lots of room for improvement. So 6.1% of the total number of trials, Canadian trials, reported patient engagement. So of those, only 1.4% had patient partners reported to be on the grant submission. That's 2 of the 142. 14.8% developing the topic or research question. How do you know if it's relevant if the people it's supposed to serve aren't part of that? 7% recruitment and retention, less than 5% developing data collection tools or assessments, 6.3% analyzing or interpreting these results. And so based on all of the trials that were collected from 2010 to the end of the scoping review date, less than 1% actually reported on patient engagement, and that's really kind of stark. Next slide, please, Motahareh. So why might this be important? Well, I pulled out a couple of numbers, and so there was a small systematic review published in 2025 that looked at all the trials that were approved by research ethics committees in the UK, Switzerland, Germany, and Canada in 2016. 31% ended early, with the major reason being poor recruitment. And this Spieth or Tam et al. 2026, it's hot off the press. It's in press right now. 31% of the trials started between January 2017 to December 2021 did not meet 85% of the recruitment target. And these trials specifically had at least one site in Canada. So it is relevant to us. And the earlier remove talked about possible reasons to this poor recruitment. They had said 45% of those trials, even though it was small, were stopped to do with poor recruitment. Mistrust in research question is perceived as not relevant. The high burden, so this could be procedures, the type of assessments. The trial that was offered to my son would have required 4 hours driving one way, at least once a month, 2 to 3 days of recovery, and who knows how many different types of assessments, but we couldn't actually do it feasibly within our family context, especially since the last intake the only intake and the last one for that trial, because it was offered toward the end of the trial, was offered the week before final exams, and he'd already missed 50% of his school time, and it was a week for him to actually catch up, review, and possibly be able to find some credits. And since that was really important to him, we chose not to take part in the trial. It might be timing, might be ICU patients, it might be a person in labor. How do you approach that? You might have to you might want to study that population, but will require trauma-informed and very sensitive approaches. They did name lack of patient engagement, but I would argue that the lack of patient engagement can affect everything else above. And so I also had another experience with trials, and I'm somebody, the group will know that if I start something, I really like to finish it, but we were involved in a clinical trial that we just couldn't finish. And it was around sleep. And I will say it did not account for the possibility of a large family with shared bedrooms. And so it was really not suitable in the way it was designed to take in the context of our lives. And this really contributes to research waste, and we really don't want to do that. Any money that's spent on a trial that's not finished, and we all know that trials can be very, very expensive, and the more expensive as you go through different phases of the trial, if we don't complete that trial well, that's a waste. We could have used that research to do research on other things. And I'm arguing that it's unethical to ask patients to participate in trials that don't go to completion, because and it's time and effort and a lot of different things that they could be doing in the meantime. They're already really busy with their lives navigating health issues as it is, or their children's health issues. And we need activities as patients and as patient partners that are worth our time. And if a trial doesn't go to completion and it can't be used for an intervention or to improve things or to help us learn more so we can go on to other interventions that will help our families cope, then it's unethical. And I'm going to turn it over. And the question is why engagement might be so low. So I'm going to turn it over to Jan to talk about some barriers.
Jan, you are mute.
Thank you. So again, for me, first barrier to meaningful engagement is often not structural, it's personal. When we talk about barrier to meaningful engagement and partnership, our first instinct is often to point outward. We think about system, institution, policies, lack of funding, rigid framework, or inaccessible process. And yes, these structural barriers are real, they matter, they shape what is possible. But today I want to shift the focus slightly because very often before we even reach the structural barrier, there's another layer, quiet, less visible, but just as powerful. The first barrier is often not structural, it's personal. It's live in us, in our fears. It's really universal emotion, in our uncertainties, in our perceived lack of ability to engage fully, honestly, and collaboratively with others. Let's start with fears. Fears shows up in many forms in engagement and partnership space. The fear of not being legitimate enough, the fear of saying the wrong thing, the fear of being judged, dismissed, or misunderstood. It is the fear of losing, sometimes it's the fear of losing control, of entering a space where outcomes are shared, not owned, and fears as consequence. It's make us caution, it's make us silent, it's push us towards safe participation rather than meaningful participation. We attend meeting, we follow protocol, we respect structure, but we hold back part of ourselves. And when people hold back, partnership become procedural instead of relational. The second personal barrier is lack of confidence or perceived lack of skill. Many people, whether they are professional, community member, or live experience partner, enter engagement space thinking, I'm not equipped for this. That's my case. They may feel they don't have a right vocabulary. They may not understand the code, the language, the implicit rule of institutional environment. They may feel that others are more qualified, more expert, more legitimate. And so instead of contributing fully, they step back or they adapt their voice to fit what they think it's expected, or they stay silent until feel ready. A rightness that often never come. But meaningful partnership does not require perfection. It's required participation, it's required presence, and it's required the courage to engage even when we feel uncertain. Because here is the paradox: the very space that aim to be inclusive often and unintentionally amplify this personal barrier. When environments are overly technical, overly formal, or overly controlled, they reinforce the idea that only certain kind of knowledge, language, or behavior are valid and relevant. This increases fear, it's increased self-doubt, and it's narrow participation. So what to do with this? First, we need to recognize that engagement, it's not only structural design problem, it's also a relational and emotional. And you have to invest on this. We all have only 24 hours a day, sick or healthy, rich or poor, patient, caregiver, or researcher. So self-consciousness is so important to have a good start. We cannot build meaningful partnership only by changing policy or framework. We also need to address how people feel inside those space. We need to normalize uncertainty. We need to make room for learning in real time. We need to expect that not knowing is not weakness, and it's a part of the process. Second, we need to actively reduce the pressure of expertise performance. People should not feel they need to perform competence in order to belong. They should be able to learn, to ask questions, to make mistakes, and to contribute from where they are. Third, we need to cultivate psychological safety in engagement space, not as soft extra, but as core conditional for real collaboration, because without safety, people protect themselves instead of participating fully. Finally, we need to reframe what's meaningful partnership actually is. It's not the perfect alignment of expert around the table following the grid. It's not the smooth execution of predefined plan. It's a dynamic, something's uncomfortable, always evolving process between people who bring different experience, knowledge, and level of confidence, and who choose to stay in a relation despite that complexity. So yes, structural barrier matters, they must be addressed, but if we only focus on structure, we miss something fundamental, because even in the best design system, engagement will fail if people are held back by fear or by the belief that they are not enough. And if we can begin to name that and work with it, that we open a different kind of space, a space where participation is not reserved for the confident, a space where partnership is not defined by expertise alone, but a space where people can show up and they are and grow into what they are becoming together. I will now let the space to my colleague.
Thank you so much, Amanda and Jan. Following our scoping review and reported and saw the low reported percentages of the patients' engagement in Canadian randomized controlled trial, we conducted a series of interviews with 31 researchers and patients' partner who had experience in Canadian randomized controlled trial from 7 provinces across Canada to explore the barriers, facilitators, and needs associated with patients' engagement from their perspective. So they identify several important barriers that can limit the meaningful patients' engagement implementation. They identify structural and system level barriers from the patient's perspective. There are challenges such as limited funding, lack of institutional recognition, and slow system adaptation for patients' engagement. And from the patient's partner perspective, barriers include administrative process and tokenistic engagement, where patients is sometimes superficial and only required to meet the funding criteria. They also identify the issues related to engagement process and power dynamics. Researchers often report uncertainty about how to effectively involve patients along with time constraints. At the same time, patients' partner may experience unclear roles, limit input in decision-making, poor communications, and may feel undervalued, which can highlight an imbalance in power and expectation. Also, they identify representation and inclusion barriers, because recruiting a diverse and representative patients partner can be difficult. They're concerned about overrepresentation of the certain groups and underrepresentation of the others. Because sometimes the same patient's partner are often repetitively involved with the different outcome measure in the same team, and there might be limited access to broader patients researcher network, which may limit the awareness of the engagement opportunity in clinical trial. And also the financial and practical constraints play a major role. The researchers face challenges in determining fair compensation and dealing with administrative burden, while patients' partner report lack of clarity around compensation, time constraints, and sometimes personal or health-related limitations. So overall, addressing these barriers is important and critical to ensure that the patient's partner is meaningful, inclusive, and truly improve the quality and impact of the clinical research. They also identify the several facilitators that support patients' engagement in clinical trial. One of the facilitators is communication and relationship building. Strong partnership are built on trust, respect, and ongoing listening. Creating an inclusive and psychologically safe environment is essential, so the patient's partner feel comfortable sharing their experiences, and also using the plain language is essential so the patient's partner can understand, and also providing regular updates and maintaining open and respectful dialogue also strengthen this relationship over time. The engagement process and practice also play a critical role. Early and continuous involvement of the patient's partner throughout the research trial cycle is particularly important. The practical strategies that they identify include inviting patients' partner to team meetings, asking specific and meaningful questions, and ensuring clear expectation, timelines, and roles. And flexible meetings times and iterative discussion can further support the active and sustained participation. And also the timing and capacity building are essential for both the researchers and patients' partner. The researchers can benefit from workshops and experiential learning, while patients' partner may require tailored training to build confidence and understanding of the research process. And also peer-led training and leadership development opportunities can further enhance meaningful engagement. So all of these are the examples of the facilitators that can help move patients' engagement from a tokenistic approach to a truly collaborative partnership that improve the relevance and impact of the clinical research. So I hand over to my colleagues to elaborate more ways to improve the patient's engagement in clinical trial.
Don't forget to unmute. And like researchers who have to submit application, we are in state of emergency always. So what we can do right now, there's a big work already done to identify several, more than 300 facilitator and obstacle. And what I understand is when you collaborate, there's no problem to solve, only a solution to build. So what we can do right now, when we talk about meaningful engagement and partnership, we often return to the same place. Structural barrier, we talk about funding constraint, limited staffing, rigid system, fragmented services, and the slow pace of institutional change. And all of this is real. The structure shape was what is possible, and we cannot ignore them. But again, if we stop there, we miss another essential question. not only what we could do with more, but what what we can do right now. So because alongside long-term structural change, there are already powerful facilitator available to us, tool, approach, and mindset that can transform engagement today if we choose to use them differently. Let's start with technology. For a long time, digital tools were seen as secondary, supporting is person interaction rather than shaping engagement itself. But this is has changed. The technology is now one of the main space where engagement happen, and increasingly where we are seeing the rise of immersive virtual environment that go behind traditional video call or static platform. These are space where people can feel a stronger sense of presence even at distance. We talk about obstacle, time, geography, where interaction become more natural, more embodied, and more human. This matter because one of the biggest barriers to engage is not only access, it's also distance, not just geographical distance, but also the relational and institutional distance between people, system, and lived experience. Immersive digital space, rather than traditional Zoom, help reduce that gap that do not replace in-person connection, but they expand what connection can looks like. They make it possible for people who will never meet physically to share a sense of being together. From there, something else become possible, more spontaneous, informal, and human from interaction. But technology does not stop there. We are also entering a moment where artificial intelligence can become a powerful catalyst for engagement if it used ethically and intentionally. AE can help transform complex information into formats that are accessible and meaningful for different audience. Instead of standardized report, we can create adaptive, inclusive, and personalized way of sharing knowledge. This matters because engagement is impossible if people cannot access or understand the information that affect them. In that sense, AE is not just about efficiency, it's about equity. It can support literacy in multiple forms, digital, health-related, and civic, helping to democratize knowledge so more people can participate fully in shaping it. When we combine immersive environment, digital connectivity, and AE-supported knowledge translation, something important happens. We realize we do not always need to wait for perfect system or increase funding to improve engagement. We can begin now. We can create space where belonging is strengthened. We can make knowledge more accessible. We can design interaction that are more human, inclusive, and adaptive. But technology alone is not enough. The real catalyst is the intention. Technology only became meaningful when guided by clear vision that engagement should not be exclusive, hierarchical, or difficult, but open, relational, and co-created. And this lead to a deeper shift, a shift from teaching to creating. Too often, engagement still follow on a one-way model, expert to user, institution to individual, system to communities. But meaningful partnership is not about delivering knowledge. It's about to co-creating it. It's about recognizing that everyone involved brings something valuable and that technology should amplify those contributions, not replace them. At the center of all of this remain one guiding priority, lived experience, not as a final step, not as feeding at the end of the process, but as the starting point, because when we begin with lived experience, everything's changed. Technology became a bridge, not a barrier. Knowledge became shared, not controlled. Engagement became relational, not transactional. Yes, structural barrier remains, and we must continue working to change them, but we do not need to wait for them to be fully resolved before we act. We could adjust small attitude to accommodate people right now. We already have tool, we already have space, we already have the capacity to rethink how we connect, collaborate, and create together. Be creative. The question is not whether we have enough. The question is how we choose to use what we already have. And alongside system and tools, there's another layer that matters just as much, our own autonomy and self-awareness. Again, because mindful engagement is not only built externally, it's also shaped internally in how we listen, reflect, question, and act within a relationship. Autonomy is not isolation, it's the ability to engage consciously without losing oneself in the process. Self-awareness allow us to recognize, since without this, even the best system will struggle. Ultimately, mindful partnership is not something done to people or for people, it's something built with people. There are already many tools and programs and framework, like I said, designed to support collaboration. But beyond all of that, what's really matter is doing it together. We also have the autonomy to adjust small everyday habits that strengthen how we work with one others. And often it's the small detail that make the biggest difference in building meaningful partnership, because real engagement, it's not only system we design. It's a participative we live. So share the space to my colleague now.
So as you listen to everything through this talk, I want you to encourage you to consider and then learn how to, and then place, and then start engaging patients in your work. And one of the things that I've read on LinkedIn recently, Keith Berkowitz published, was eligibility does not equal feasibility. So use patient engagement. Engage with patients so they can help you make your clinical trials more feasible and useful to your target audience. And where do you go from here? We have a lot of additional training and resources that we can provide after, or hopefully we can put these on the YouTube channel under the in the comments. The Patient Engagement Committee actually put together a resource page that you'll see at the very top here, which includes some of these other ones. I've just included newer links. The impact trials at the time that we made this, so late 2024, impact trials was working on their engagement in pediatric and perinatal clinical trials research module. CanTrain has one module on patient engagement in clinical trials. Right now, that's in the process of getting transferred to McGill, so just keep your eye out for that. Some of the ones that are not specific to clinical trials are the PORCH and the MHA training. These, if you say, I don't have time for training, start here. These are half-hour modules. You can fit them in pretty easily. Some of them are for investigators or researchers. Some of them are for patient partners or potential patient partners. The Unité du Soutien SSA Quebec has resources. Next slide, please, Motahareh. Popcorn, which is a pediatric, I have kids, pediatric network, has a new Deconstruct to Reconstruct training series. I'm going to give a shout out to webinar 2 here because it explicitly talks about communication and provides an idea of how communication is good and how not so good. And there's an exercise in there that's a very creative way of understanding this. Pastoral is the national training entity, has resources in French and English, the Center of Excellence for Partnership and Patients. And if you have a patient, know somebody that's interested in, but I have no understanding of research, send them to the Unité du Soutien SSA Quebec, actually created a resource to increase research literacy at understandingresearch.ca or comprendre la recherche.ca, and you can start there. So we only have a few more minutes and we'll answer any questions that you may have. Thanks. Or you can reach out to us after because we're going to run out of time. We may run out of time. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Motahareh, Jan, and Amanda. That was, I really learned a lot, and I think it helps because I was recently a first time, engaging with patient partners, and I didn't even realize this, like, oh, the question of, well, what do I have to do as a patient partner? And I didn't have the resources to explain, like, what it means to be a patient partner. So I feel like we defaulted to the people who already were familiar with the system. And I feel like that's very limiting. So thank you so much for highlighting these resources. because then I feel like we can engage more, like a more broader community to be patient partners. And so thank you so much. So I'll open the floor for questions. If anybody in the room or online has any. Um, so- well, in terms of like the training materials that you shared, what would be like what's some example that you would that a patient partner would learn from these materials? Like what type of information is communicated in these training seminars?
And I let you answer this question, I think.
Okay. In training seminars, which in particular, there's lots of training seminars. So the particular one, the Deconstruct, Reconstruct, will walk you through some relationship building tools. We'll walk you through some evaluation frameworks, tips on compensation, lots of things in there. Just what engagement is and various things. I was also reading, I'm sorry, I got a little distracted because I was reading the question in the chat. So if you don't mind, I'm going to answer that since we have 3 minutes. Alicia asked if I mentioned led projects, wondering if you have any tips for patient partners interested in leading or co-leading projects. Places that provide funding or supports patient-led projects, and if there are supports. This is rare. It's still pretty rare. The BC Support Unit actually has a new paper out at the end of 2025 about patient-initiated projects, and I would suggest you go there. I happen to be very fortunate. I'm a patient partner trainee with Sepsis Canada, and I won that award to lead that project, and I'm also a member of the Rare Kids Can network. And so the engagement on rare disease clinical trials came about from that. They were doing a big inventory on pediatric rare disease clinical trials, and every sub-platform was doing a subscoping review. And I'm like, hey, there's no patient engagement subscoping review scheduled here. When are we going to do it? And they're like, you mentioned it, you do it. So sometimes it's within those networks. I will say there is a matching tool with some of the CIHR grants now. So if you're a patient partner that might be interested in some research, I would really encourage you to kind of look at some of those competitions, and with that have a matching tool to say they're interested. Sometimes people might have to say they want to do patient engagement, they have an interest, but they don't know who to reach out to, and that can help you reach out to them. There's also something called the Patient and Community Engaged Research Training. That's done by cohorts, and that's through the University of Calgary, that if your specific condition is part of a cohort, you might be able to apply there. And so it's still really hard for like patient partners to hold you can't hold your own funding. Even in my project, I have a professor at the McMaster University who holds the funding for that patient-led project. So this is something that I'm hoping will change with the new iteration of SPORE and make it more feasible to do patient-initiated and patient-led research. But there are some opportunities. Thank you.
We have a question in the room.
Thank you, Amanda. This is very exciting. And I'm actually just thinking loudly about how early the involvement should start, and thinking about the processes of participating in a clinical trial starts with the consent process. Would you maybe suggest that patient partners should be involved in the designing of the consent, or to understand like the burden and how it can be? I'm thinking of how early this should happen, and it's very exciting. Thank you very much.
As you're developing your idea and writing your grant. But if not, if you have already done that and you put some funding in there for patient partners, or you can get some funding in your process, I would suggest you add it in. It might be the consultation piece. It might be an advisory piece. You can really early, and actually you can have patient engagement in the preclinical stage. So you may be all clinical trialists, but if you go to labpartners.ca, you'll see a preclinical research patient engagement framework. I believe it's posted there, because it can help go from that kind of basic research, and I have to tell you, I'm a biochemist by training, basic research stage, and helping you communicate your research really well and translate it to the next stage and get it to the bedside. That's what we're hoping that engaging very, very early. So if you're a clinical trialist and you have this idea or even this niche research area that you're looking at, see if there's some interest in helping develop the grant together. And acknowledge that you might not be able to fund that. Be upfront, communicate well, and you might be surprised at how the protocol might change just slightly, the processes might change something, and consent, absolutely. A 20-page consent form can be overwhelming. So are you really getting informed consent if it's overwhelming? And I should let Jan answer questions next. Thanks.
Well, if we have no more questions in the room, I think we'll end the session for today. You've left us with so many resources and things to think about, and it's going to be posted on our core channel. So please forward it to all of your contacts, and it'll be a great resource for our community. So thank you so much, Motahareh and Amanda and Jan, and it was really a pleasure. So thank you and happy Clinical Trials Day, everyone.